You mentioned space.
Right.
Without talking about NASA, what do you?
Tough.
And we don't need to because I'm not talking about
Okay.
rocketry,
Okay.
nothing like that.
Okay.
What's up there?
A structure. Again, we're living in a building with walls and floor and a ceiling. And it's so massive that you could fit not only can you fit an entire ecosystem, but every other system that feeds into the ecosystem. So the jet stream, which is, was it less than 10 miles up, I think. And then if think of it this way, if most of our civilization, 99% of our civilization exists at less than 10 miles high. The ceiling of this place doesn't have to be that high. And I know people said, well, it could be anywhere from 400 kilometers to 3,000, give or take. And it's like, might be, but either way, whatever the ceiling of this place is shallow by comparison. It's way wider than it is high. So it'd look on the outside like a shallow sports stadium. What's it made out of? Take your pick. Heavy element, heavy water, electromagnetic field, unified field, high frequency. Could
But
be any one of the
what about what we see up there?
just
Stars,
lights
space,
in the sky, and that's all it is. I mean, I'm old enough. I know you probably I don't know where you grew up, but uh,
Midwest.
I got to go to planetariums when I was younger, and did not appreciate them because it was super boring. Nobody goes to a planetarium. You know, it was always the weekend with Laser Floyd and Laser Led Zeppelin. Those were the only
Mhm.
interesting things about planetariums. But I didn't appreciate them until now. I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. Because that's how we used to show people. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is what the stars look like. And which is why the Truman Show resonated so much with me later, which was could we, granted our resources are limited, could you build a planetarium that was 20 miles wide? Yeah, you could. You absolutely could. It would cost billions to do it, but you absolutely could pull it off. Uh, and if you were an advanced civilization, could you build one that was thousands of miles wide? I think very easily done. I mean, it's just engineering, resources. We didn't have anything to do with it. But anyway, sorry. Lights in the
Yeah.
sky, planets in the stars. The sun and the moon are much bigger by comparison, much more active, but they're still tiny. One of the things that, sorry, I got to go off on a tangent real quick because I've been thinking about this more and more, and that one of the flaws of the flat Earth model when it's shown to people is you always have this big sun and the moon going
Hmm.
around, you know, like a mobile above a child's crib, which is true. But that's the only way you can show it is that it's like, oh, okay, this is what the sun and the moon, but the sun and the moon can't be that freaking big because it would be the sun and the moon to be still thousands of miles wide. In fact, the moon would actually be almost damn actual size in that case. We're talking about a moon and the sun that are just tiny by comparison, you know, 50 miles or wide or less, which would make it way more realistic. But it's really hard to depict that on a map. You're just talking about a tiny, tiny light that's going across it. So, sorry. I go.
So to try and get into the minutia of this particular topic, because I'm fascinated with astronomy. I have several telescopes. I've taken pictures of my own.
Oh
I'm
boy.
I'm kind of an astronomy nerd.
That's right.
Um, when I look at Jupiter through my telescope,
Right.
physically, what am I looking at?
You're looking at a light. In fact, I got that exact question from a radio show guy in England, and he just beat this thing to death. He just kept asking the same question. He goes, "I've seen the rings of Saturn. I've seen the moons of Jupiter." I said, "Fine," and I'm not being condescending in any way. I mean, I've had this argument tons and tons of times, which is fine. Take a pair of binoculars, go into the planetarium, look up at Jupiter, which is now up on the ceiling. Get your eyes adjusted. It looks very realistic. Nowadays, it's actually pretty good. Does it look more or less real? And you're looking with the binoculars, and you say, "Well, that doesn't really count because we're in a building." You know, actually, that's my point. I go, "Who's saying when you're not walking out of that building, you're just not in a much, much bigger building?" We're talking about a resolution here that's far advanced. I mean, we're up to 8K is being released this year, right? What if, and think about this, we've only had HD for 20 years, and 20 years ago, it was terrible by comparison. What if we had another 500 years? What could we do with resolution? What could we build? I know for a fact, because I've seen them, that we can build skylights now with a full moving sun with perspective and a blue sky. You could put in your room right now on a sunny day, you would never tell wasn't the real thing. And we've had this technology. We've had this technology for 5 years. So who's to say when you're not looking up there that you're not just looking at lights that I'm sorry, looking at lights in the sky?
So you would feel that and if I'm misquoting you, or if you're not certain, because obviously you can't be certain about everything,
Oh, sure.
but the images we see in the sky at night, do you
Right.
feel they are projected on it? Do you feel that it's a screen? Do you think that there's something outside the firmament?
It's a tough call. I don't think it's rear projection or, I'm sorry, front projection. Sorry, I'm confusing the old technology. Is front projection the? I think it's built in. It's not being shot from down. It's not being lit from down
Okay.
here. Not like, well, yeah, you're good point, because a lot of planetariums shoot the images obviously
Yeah.
from the middle of the stage, and they shoot around. But if you had unlimited money, that's not what you would do with the planetarium. Even now, you would just build in a whole bunch of freaking flat panels and integrate them, and you could make amazing stuff. So no, it's whatever's it's lit up there. It's not shot from down here. No way.
You think it's
It
part
would be
of the
too easy.
dome?
The way?
You would say that it's part of the dome
It's
structure.
either built in, yeah, it's either built in. That's what I would do anyway. It's either built into the dome, or it's just on the outside of it. Of course, if you want to get into the really weird arguments, which is a whole nother thing, and that's the whole virtual aspect of it, which is, well, what do we do in simulations now? I mean, truthfully, and I talked about this in the last chapter, which was, if it is flat and it's enclosed, it's probably digital. Just because at that point, and because everyone thinks mechanically, not to go into a biblical side of things, but everyone, always thought that, oh, we always describe God and his tools in whatever tools we have, right? And then,
Hmm.
but it's like, look, we didn't invent programming. We can do amazing. That's my field. We can do amazing things. Been be able to do amazing things for the last 15 years, and there's something that we put up there, when we do sky simulations. Any game, Warcraft on this machine, it's called a skybox, which is basically, it's the sky is literally just a box that's laid over the top. And you think, well, wouldn't it be like a dome? It's like, no, we just simulate the dome, because computers don't like thinking in circles or any round edges. Computers think in squares. They don't know what to do with circles. Human beings can draw circles naturally, but computers literally just, I mean, pixels are all squares. They're little boxes.
Hmm.
So, I mean, from a projection standpoint, yes. If you're talking about a physical projection, then yes, it's in the dome. But if you want to get even more advanced, then it's probably, just part of the skybox system.
Then my next question to that would be, what about the satellites we can see at night now that have not been there historically?
Oh
Are
no, I'm not
those
saying that's.
part of that?
Oh, no, I'm
Are
not.
those
No, no,
part
no.
of
I'm not
that
saying.
simulation, or is that something different?
No, no. Satellites exist. Absolutely. In fact, I got into a not a heated discussion with a guy down in it was an Australian television show just recently, and it was an American of all things. And he goes, "How are we even talking right now?" I go, "Through the underwater fiber optics we've been laying forever."
Yeah.
I go, "Satellites transmit like dick for bandwidth." And I go, the NASA high altitude balloon program has been going around since the 1950s. It was never a secret. With hydrogen balloons, we can load massive payloads, upwards of 4 tons. He goes, "Yeah, I know. I work on that program." I'm going, "Why are you admitting this to me? This is not something you want to talk about." But no, there's satellites up there. I'm just saying that they're not. Most of them aren't put up by rockets, because you wouldn't. If you can use a hydrogen balloon for literally pennies on the dollar,
But
why?
can you
Well,
control a hydrogen balloon?
I think
Can
you
you
could if you
control
knew
it?
that. I think well, control ish with whatever jet stream you're going up to. I mean, I don't know what's above the 10-mile jet stream, the planes use. There may be something higher that's, I mean, I don't know, that's much quicker. Maybe you can kind of approximate it. I mean, I don't, from what I understand, they launch a lot of these things. So maybe you can kind of leapfrog signals. And honestly, what signals are you using other than the military? What sort of bandwidth are you transmitting, and for what end? I mean, if fiber optics handles most of the load, I'm just not exactly sure. At that point, you have to question what satellites are actually being used for things and what are just being used for corporations that think they're putting up satellites. Which is, I'm sorry,
Well,
here's another
yeah.
thing real quick about satellites, which is something that always bothered me when I was out in Colorado, because I used to do a lot of sky watching myself, mostly because I was looking for UFOs, with night vision binoculars. And every once in a while, you'd hear, but you're an astronomer. Every once in a while, you'd hear about the meteor showers that would come in, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, oh yeah, annual or biannual or whatever meteor showers. no one seemed to care much about them. These meteor showers, they would come into the atmosphere, and there's got to be satellites up there, but no satellites ever got tagged or winged, or it's like no one would ever watching CBS, and all of a sudden, blink, CBS would go down, or what and so when the movie Gravity came out with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock, something really bugged me about that movie, which was the whole premise was that there was this cascade effect of, okay, one satellite knocks into another satellite, and pretty soon the whole sky is full of jagged metal flying at thousands of miles an hour, and it runs into them and begin your storyline. We never see that ever. And if you know statistics at all, eventually, if a satellite goes off course, if they are circling in that sort of pattern, that's exactly what would happen. They would start cascading. I mean, it would only be a matter of time before, once it gets off course, it would run into another, and then that would run into another. And yeah, it may not happen on the 5th orbit or the 10th orbit, but on the 20th orbit, it's going to. And the whole sky would just turn into a garbage heap of flying metal. And that's not what we see. Everything runs just fine. They die on their own, and nothing seems to be a problem. And nobody seems, again, worried. It's like, oh, the meteor shower's coming. It's like, oh, hey, shouldn't you be retasking those satellites like we saw in Patriot games? Are you like moving them all over the place? I never saw that. It kind of bugged me.
Now, I actually did a video like 4 months ago about meteors, specifically about meteor showers.
Yeah.
How I feel how the phenomenon occurs conforms with a globe Earth. Are you aware what the scientific description of what the cause of meteor showers is? Like the root cause of why?
No.
Comets.
Comets just passing by, dropping off a few fragments, and
correct. So basically, every comet in their orbit is a trail of dust that they're leaving as they go by. And then the explanation for meteor showers is that the Earth is passing through that corridor of dust that's been left by a comet.
Sure.
So when a comet is recent, it's usually really high peak for a meteor shower because it's just been left behind. Halley's Comet actually is supposed to be the cause for 2 different meteor showers, for on the inbound journey of Halley's Comet and the outbound journey.
Right.
Now, the one thing that really caught me off guard on this when I was looking into it was that, so trying to think of a way to imagine it, if you imagine a corridor of dust vertical, and the Earth is coming this way in its orbit, it's only the front side of the Earth that is plowing through the orbit.
Sure.
And that's what we see. And now if you imagine the sun is up here, dust lane is here, on this front half of the Earth, the upper quarter is daylight, the lower quarter is nighttime. So the upper quarter, you wouldn't see it because the sun's out. The lower quarter is where you would see the peak of the meteor shower, and that's what we observe. The best meteor showers are observed, or all meteor showers, the peak of them is between midnight and sunrise because they're coming up around on the forward-facing side as it plows through the dust.
Cool.
So that, like I said, I did a video on that 4 or 5 months ago. It's one of the things to me that's independent of pretty much every other, government aspects, conspiracies, that fits with the heliocentric model because the rear-facing side of the Earth doesn't have that peak of meteor strikes. And meteor strikes, you can, or as they ionize coming through the atmosphere, you can actually pick them up on radio signal if you know how. I don't, but I've know people who do.
Right.
And on this sunlit side, where you can't physically see the meteor streaks, you can still pick them up with the radio signal. So I would encourage you to look into that. It's one of the things that makes me think that the Earth is round.
Sure.
Thank you for listening to that. That's again.
No. It's groovy. It's groovy. And by the way, we don't. You probably already knew this. Everybody in my circles, we don't actually use the word round, which was interesting because of the Newsweek thing. It's like, really, guys? Because round. Remember, round can also be 2-dimensional. It's not sphere. It's not ball. It's not globe. It's kind of how we find out who's where. Yeah. If people use the word round enough times in a sentence, like, okay, I know where you are. You're. Anyway, go ahead.
One of the other things you'd mentioned, we were talking about satellites, that balloons might be what we see in the sky, and I'm not going to argue or discuss the purpose of them, bandwidth and communication, but I've seen enough of them up in the sky that there's something up there. You can't deny there is something. Where it's at is the question.
You're absolutely right. Here's the other thing, real quick, about satellites. When I was watching them, I remember the reason why I grabbed it. Seriously, if you get a chance, pick up some night vision binoculars. You
Mhm.
can in a 5 power. You generally like a Gen 1. Don't spend a lot of money on them. A Gen 2, they cost a lot of money, but that's meant for distinguishing who's your neighbor and who's not. If you're just looking up in the
Just
sky,
so you know, I'm active duty military, so I have a locker full of them at the office.
perfect. Well, but are those general night vision or like the flip down over the helmet type?
We've got some that are for scopes as well.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. If you get a chance, there was a British guy. Remember I was bored at the time, and you want to look at some weird stuff. He goes, go out at night with some night vision binoculars and just get your eyes adjusted and start looking. And I go, whatever. Sure, why not? So I bought some on Amazon, and most of them are Russian made, which is interesting that they cornered the market on most night vision shit. And I was looking up there, and the first day I remember I was going, literally the whole first night I'm going, super boring. I mean, when you look through, I mean, the sky is crawling with stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
there's just crawling with stuff. It's like They Live. I mean, your life is like, wow, and that was the thing. I said, man, there's a lot of satellites. This was way before I was into flat Earth, right? This was back in 2012. And then the next day I go out, it's like, oh, I gotta look for more satellites. And I look and I start seeing some that aren't acting in a normal satellite way. And I mean, like slowing, the one that just killed me was like he slowed down, like he was lost, turned right, went ballistic, and then, and just, went off and unbelievable speed and altitude. And then I was seeing watch flying in squadrons and stuff like that. And I'm going, okay, these are not birds. I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. So I don't tell people a lot about this, but I say there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of stuff that I don't think is us. I don't think, I don't know whose it is. I don't know what civilizations it is, but I don't think it's us. And I know the American military would love to take credit for it. Like to take credit with a lot of things, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that there isn't satellites. Just
So
might
then,
just
what do you think the space station is? That not what's up there, but because I've twice I have photographed the space station as it transited in front of the sun.
Oh, sure.
Um, it took a lot of effort to get it done and timing and equipment and stuff like that. But I have the first time I photographed it, it was a 3/4 of a second transit time
Yeah.
across the entire disk of the sun, and I got 5 images at high speed.
Wow.
And you can still see what it is. I mean, it is the general shape and outline, and even Jaron Campanella has done this as well.
Sure.
What do you think I took a picture of?
Don't know. Some sort of military technology, obviously, since NASA's all military. Do I think that there's something up there? Yes, I do. No question. I've never questioned that. I know that people have taken shots of it. That is not in dispute. There's something big up there, and it looks sort of like what they describe. Sure. Do I think there's people up there? No. Not a chance. If there were, they would not be using the absolutely, and you've watched some of this stuff, the horrid
Yeah.
production value. I mean, it's embarrassing how bad it is. And I'm trying to figure out, that's the part that bugs me more than anything. It's almost like they want to get caught. Like they're fudging, they're smudging up the work deliberately. I've never seen even your, oh my God, I know Hollywood people. Even your worst B and C list directors would not use some of the techniques they're using, and yet they are. It's like, what? Why? Why? Nobody. But then again, it shouldn't necessarily surprise me because the Apollo stuff aged so terribly. But
So
anyway,
with the ISS,
yeah,
and this is I, in a lot of my videos and my thought process is if you can find one thing and just beat it to death and
yeah,
figure out what it is,
yeah.
that's kind of what I don't like leaving things hanging without answers. That's why I kind of dig into these to get your
Sure,
perspective on them.
sure.
With the ISS, there's a website that you can use to predict transits. Put in your location over the next 30 days. It'll give you when they're supposed to be, but supposedly it moves once in a while, so it'll change.
Sure,
Um, Rarely is it like on your doorstep. Every time I've done it, I've had to drive like 10 miles.
sure.
But the two times I've done it, it was exactly when it was predicted.
Yeah,
It was exactly how it was supposed to be predicted.
right.
Um, if you look into that just a little bit further, and again, Jaron Campanella did this, so it's
Yep,
not like somebody did it for me. Nobody
right.
knew I was going to do it. Nobody knew he was going to do it. So something is physically up there blocking the light of the sun.
Sure.
Now, if that was part of the screen or the dome, I could see that. But if you look at this program on a map, where it predicts the transit's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Right.
And if you overlay it with the current course of the ISS, I've done the math on it, and there was a transit in South America, and 13 minutes later in Spain.
Okay.
So whatever that thing is in the sky has to be going fast enough to get from South America to Spain for those two separate observers. And that's pretty fast for any type of craft.
Sure.
What would you say to that?
I would say that as much as the earlier statement where I said that America would like to take some credit for things that they shouldn't, we also have the ability to keep secrets. What I try to tell people is, look, until there was a U-2 spy plane that was shot down over the Soviet Union in the 1960s, we didn't have one. It didn't exist. As a matter of fact, they even tried to push it off as a NASA research vehicle, which I thought was hilarious. When the SR-71 was finally declassified, it had already made it through its inception to retirement, and nobody had ever seen it.
Nobody knew.
And the line that I loved so much from the Air Force general was when they were asking him, at this meeting, it's like, oh, hey, what are you going to replace it with? He goes, oh, nothing. It's like, what? It's like, what? It's like, what? Seriously, I almost developed a facial tick. It's like, oh, you clever little. And even though they knew full well, it's like, no, we only reason declassifying this. And yes, everybody knows, for example, that there is some sort of Aurora project out there that's happening, and it's so freaking fast. But by the time you hear it, it is gone, and the only thing they can even record is the donuts and a rope engine trail from the pulse detonation engine. And we've had that for years. Whatever's up
That's
there,
been since the late 90s, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's an amazing. I love the fact that like NASA was giving some of the nerds grief because they were releasing models of this thing, little plastic models, and like speculated on that it was running on like a slush kerosene engine, or like a pulse detonation engine. Was fascinating. That it was generating so much torque that it could run on RPMs that were almost non-existent. Basically, you're basically riding an explosion, which is, boom, boom. And it was, anyway, but again, I've never ever said this. Look, there's something up there. What technology they're using, God only knows. Do I think it's real technology? Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, I don't think it's a U-2 spy plane necessarily, because U-2 it flies very, very high, but it doesn't fly very, very fast. So whatever it is really cruising. I don't know. I mean, there's some people that said it's a projection, and yeah, you could make a projection go that fast, but it's like, okay, would it be our projection? Because it wouldn't be the builder's projection. But then we're getting into some weird
That's
stuff.
kind of the question that one of the things and honestly, when I first got into the flat Earth, that was my question. It's like, okay, if you think this is a projection, and we're adding the projection of satellites and stuff to the sky, doesn't that mean we now control the dome?
Yeah. It's at that point we're going into areas that we don't know. I mean, all I can tell you is there's something up there, but whatever is up there. What you're seeing, the transit, that part seems to be as advertised. It's like, okay, speed, maybe relative size, although we can't really tell with perspective, but the speed at the very least, it's covering the distance. But the interior stuff just wrecks it.